January 2nd, 2015, from EverBank Field in Jacksonville, Florida, was the TaxSlayer Bowl between the Iowa Hawkeyes and the Tennessee Volunteers. Iowa would get the ball first after the kickoff. They had it on their own 19. Then 2nd and 10 from the 19, Jake Roddick hit Tevon Smith for a 31-yard reception. Now they had a first down at the 50, but their drive would stall on the 48, so after 5 plays, they punted the ball to the Volunteers. So now Tennessee would take over on their own 20 after the punt with about 13 minutes left in the first quarter. They would end up bringing the ball into Iowa territory. They got down into the red zone on 1st and 10 from the 19. Pig Howard ran 16 yards to make it 1st and goal on the 3. Then gave it to Jalen Hurd, and he punched in from 3 yards out for the touchdown. And the Volunteers put the first points on the scoreboard in this game with the score Tennessee 7, Iowa 0. So now the Hawkeyes would take over on their own 16 after the kickoff with about 9.5 minutes left in the first quarter. They were able to bring the ball to midfield and into Tennessee territory, but then they were faced with a 4th and 1 on the Tennessee 33. They elected to go for it, and Weisman got stopped for no gain, and so the Hawkeyes turned the ball over on downs. Now the Volunteers would take over on their own 33 with about 4.5 left in the first. And on first down, Jalen Hurd ran at 15 yards to bring it to the 48 for a first down. And then Devin Young ran it 8 yards to bring it into Iowa territory for 2nd and 2 from the 44. Josh Dobbs then hit Pearson for a 13-yard reception, a first down at the Iowa 31. And then on 2nd and 8 from the Iowa 29, Jalen Hurd ran it 29 yards all the way to the end zone for the touchdown. And it was now Tennessee 14, Iowa 0. So now the Hawkeyes get the ball after the kickoff on their own 23 with less than 3 minutes left in the first quarter, and they went 3 and out on the possession and punted from their own 24. So now the Volunteers would get the ball on the Iowa 49 to begin their possession after the punt, which still with a little less than 2 minutes left in the first. And Marlin Lane passed it to Vic Wharton for a 49-yard touchdown, and it was now Tennessee 21, Iowa 0. So now the Volunteers would kick off to the Hawkeyes, and they got the ball on the 25 after the kickoff with about 1.5 minutes left in the first quarter, and they went 3 and out for the second consecutive possession, as they ended up losing yards on the possession, and they punted from their own 24. So now Tennessee would take over on their own 38 after the punt with about 1/2 minute left in the first quarter, and Joshua Dobbs hit Pig Howard for an 11-yard reception that would make it a first down at the Tennessee 49, and that brought the first quarter to a close. So after 1 quarter of play, the score was Tennessee 21, Iowa 0. So now the Volunteers would start off the second quarter with the ball on their own 49, and they would end up bringing the ball into Iowa territory. They got down into the red zone, and on 1st and 10 from the Iowa 13, Dobbs went to Pearson. He picked up 5 in the first down. Well, not the first down. He picked up 5 to bring it to the 8-yard line. On 2nd and 5 from the 8, Josh Dobbs ran it in himself for the 8-yard touchdown, and it was now Tennessee 28, Iowa 0. So now the Hawkeyes would take over on their own 2-yard line. They got penalized on the kickoff, so they're backed up against their own end zone. And they ended up getting a personal foul against Tennessee, and that would bring them out to the 29. But after 4 plays, they ended up punting from the 38. So now Tennessee would take over with about 9.5 left before halftime. They had it on their own 34 after the punt, but now they would go 3 and out, and they ended up punting from their own 36. So now Iowa would get the ball on their own 29 after the punt with about a little over 8 minutes left before halftime. They brought it to midfield and into Tennessee territory. And on 1st and 10 from the 28, Jordan Kanzeri ran it 25 yards all the way down to the 3. So now 1st and goal from the 3, but they got stopped for no gain, then an incomplete pass, and that made it 3rd and goal from the 3. They then gave it to Weisman. He ran it in for 3 yards out for the touchdown, and Iowa was finally on the scoreboard with the score now Tennessee 28, Iowa 7. So now the Volunteers will get the ball after the kickoff with about 4 minutes left, a little less than 4 minutes left in the second quarter. They had it on their own 25. They brought it up to midfield and into Iowa territory. They got down into the red zone, and on 1st and 10 from the 19, Joshua Dobbs hit Pearson for a 19-yard touchdown pass, and it was now Tennessee 35, Iowa 7. So now they'd kick off the ball to the Hawkeyes, and they would just let the clock run out. They ran the ball for a 2-yard gain, and we went to halftime with the score Tennessee 35, Iowa 7. So now to begin the second half, the Volunteers would get the ball first. They had it on their own 28, but after 5 plays, they ended up punting from the Iowa 48. So now the Hawkeyes would take over on their own 16 with about 13 minutes left in the third, but after 5 plays, they ended up punting from the Iowa 48. And so now, after the punt, the Volunteers would take over on their own 25 with about 11 left in the third. They brought the ball to midfield and into Iowa territory. They were faced with a 3rd and 2 on the 11, and Josh Dobbs ran it in for the 11-yard touchdown, and it was now Tennessee 42, Iowa 7. So now the Hawkeyes would take over on their own 25 after the kickoff with less than 8 minutes left in the third, and they brought the ball to midfield. They got into Tennessee territory, but on 1st and 10 from the 47, C.J. Beathard fumbled the ball. Tennessee recovered. Brian Randolph recovered for the Vols, and so now Tennessee would take over at the 50-yard line. But then on 3rd and 3 from the Iowa 43, Josh Dobbs was intercepted by Desmond King. So now the Hawkeyes had the ball back in Tennessee territory at the 31 with about 5 minutes left in the third. They would get all the way down to the 5-yard line, but then Kinzeri got dropped for a 2-yard loss, and on 3rd and goal from the 7, C.J. Beathard was intercepted by Ladero McNeil. And so now the Volunteers would take over on their own 7-yard line with about 2.5 left in the third. They would go 3 and out as Dobbs was sacked on 3rd down by Jaleel Johnson. So they ended up punting from their own 5. And so now the Hawkeyes would take over in Tennessee territory at the 46 with about a minute left in the third quarter. They brought the third quarter to a close with a couple runs by Kinzeri. He ran 32 yards on 1st down to bring it all the way into the red zone to the 14-yard line, and then a 3-yard run to bring it to the 11 would bring the third quarter to a close. So after 3 quarters of play, the score was Tennessee 42, Iowa 7. So now to begin the fourth quarter, the Hawkeyes were faced with a 2nd and 7 on the 11, and Jake Ruddock picked up 10 yards on the ground. It was now a 1st down on the 1, 1st and goal. They give it to Mark Weisman. He punches it in from a yard out, and it was now Tennessee 42, Iowa 14. So now the Volunteers would take over. After Iowa attempted an onside kick, Tennessee recovered, and so now they had it on the Iowa 45, and they started just trying to run the clock down. They brought it all the way down into the Iowa 6-yard line, but then they lost yards on consecutive plays, and out came Aaron Medley to attempt a 28-yard field goal. It was up, it was good, and it was now Tennessee 45, Iowa 14. So now with 8.5 minutes left, Iowa had the ball on their own 15 after the kickoff, and they had an incomplete pass and then a pass for a yard and then another incomplete pass, and now it's 4th and 9 on the 16, and they punted the ball, but there was a catch interference call against the Hawkeyes. So now Tennessee would take over on the Iowa 38. They went 3 and out and punted from the Iowa 36. And so now the Hawkeyes would take over on their own 20 with about 6 minutes left in the game. They brought the ball into Tennessee territory, and then on 1st and 10 from the Tennessee 31, C.J. Beathard hit Ray Hamilton for a 31-yard touchdown, and it was now Tennessee 45, Iowa 21. So now the Volunteers would take over after recovering another onside kick. Iowa tried a second onside kick, and for the second time, Tennessee recovered. And now they had it on the Iowa 34, and they would just run the ball. They got it to 3rd and 1, but then they got stuffed for no gain, and on 4th and 1, they elected to go for it, and they got stopped for no gain, so they turned the ball over on downs. Now the Hawkeyes would take over on their own 25. They brought the ball to midfield, and on 1st and 10 from the Iowa 49, C.J. Beathard ran at 33 yards all the way to the red zone to the Tennessee 18 for the 1st down. Then C.J. Beathard hit Matt VandeBerg for an 18-yard touchdown, and it was now Tennessee 45, Iowa 28. They went for a 3rd onside kick, and for the 3rd time, the Vols recovered, and with with only 20 seconds left on the clock, the Vols just took a knee, and this game came to a close. So Tennessee dominant in the TaxSlayer Bowl, but they did what Alabama couldn't do last night, and they beat a Big Ten team. And the final score, Tennessee 45, Iowa 28. And in this game for the Volunteers, Joshua Dobbs was 16 of 21. He had 129 passing yards, 1 touchdown, and an interception. He also had 13 carries for 76 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. So 3 total touchdowns for Joshua Dobbs. And for the Hawkeyes, C.J. Beathard was 13 of 23 with 145 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. He also had 8 carries for 82 yards on the ground. The leading rusher in this game was Jalen Hurd. He had 16 carries for 122 yards. He also had 2 catches for 4 yards. He had 2 rushing touchdowns in this game. And the leading rusher for Iowa was Jordan Kinzeri. He had 12 carries for 120 yards. And the leading receiver was Pearson of the Volunteers. He had 7 receptions for 75 yards and a touchdown. The leading receiver for the Hawkeyes was Ray Hamilton with 3 receptions for 51 yards. And each team ended up getting a pick in this game. As for the Hawkeyes, Desmond King had an interception, and Ladero McNeil had an interception for the Volunteers. So Tennessee, they went up going into the fourth quarter. It was 42-7. They were up by 35 points. The Hawkeyes outscored them in the fourth quarter 21-3, but it wouldn't be enough as they ended up losing this game by 17 points. The final score, Tennessee 45, Iowa 28.